is, thanks. Where's the chat? Vitaly. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. We don't have any questions submitted for today, so if you guys would like, either type your question out or just use the raise hand feature, and Sabrina will mute you, and we will go ahead. There we go. Sabrina, looks like we got a question from Alex.
Hey, Will, how are you doing today?
Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. I guess this is just kind of like a philosophical question, but with regards to assignments, or I guess it's, what is the actual name here? It's like an add task.
Okay, sure.
So, like whether or not the task completes successfully, I mean, that's something that I decide, right, as the designer. Like decisions is just basically going to record whether the thing completed or not. Is that what's going on here?
The assignment knows the outcome path it took. Now that can be more or less useful given the outcome path name, right? So if if it has approve or deny or API complete, and that it does complete. Yeah, so it is from a with no sort of custom design, if you will, or custom pieces of your flow. Yeah, the assignment just knows it's complete and the path it took in the flow to complete. Those are the two real pieces of information it has about itself. Most of the information you will be recording off discretely using whatever data structure you're using to track that process, be it a case, a process folder, or something else entirely.
Right. So okay, that makes sense. But so you know, I'm always thinking about this 21 CFR Part 11 thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like when they press a button in an assignment, I need to re-authenticate. And so, but as far as decisions goes, the task has already done what it's going to do, right? So basically, from my point of view, like I can't really change, like, so the outcome path is going to be accept, for example. But then if they fail their actual secondary logon because I guess that's kind of the next thing that I would have in my flow, is to pop up the secondary logon screen.
Mm-hmm.
And then basically I would need to track that in my, my process data type kind of thing.
Mm.
Is that the idea there?
Yeah, well, so yeah, I mean, if you're thinking about them as different forms, then you're right. Like you'd complete the form to go to another form, which this authentication form, right? And then once it's complete, you'd move down your, I guess, the happy path of your flow. You can have the form loop back. There are settings on assignments to reuse an assignment, because you can create looping behavior. And here you're having a bit of that looping behavior in a way, right? I'm just gonna put up some steps on the canvas here, since I'm sharing screen, just so people have some context. So here's a show. Let me just put a form, the button. This will become, I'll just call this approve and deny. And so this thing is an assigned form. I'm not going to set it up, but if we think about, you can create looping behaviors, and there's a setting here to sort of to allow that to happen. If we go to assignment setup on our assigned form and scroll to the bottom, assignment reuse is set to no, but you can with this set to no, if we were in this loop here, you'd get a new assignment like in your process folder each time you loop through. With reuse assignment being set to always, or if same assignee, and the form goes back, it'll just update the existing assignment. So you can leverage reuse assignment if you need to have the possibility, because in your example, someone might fat finger their authentication, right, and then be denied, and you need to handle that. And you wouldn't want to create, I mean, arguably in your world, you don't want this to be an assignment also. You only want, I mean, maybe you do need, if you do need to view the authentication piece as like a completed form, then this will need to be an assignment as well. But you could imagine if something like this with reuse assignment being set on both of these, and a deny is like not authenticated or something, and then approve moves on. And so this would be like the base form. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. I just want to type. Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the looping that I'm going to be doing is that on the re-authentication, if they mistype their password or something like that, I would like to give them like a number of opportunities to try that kind of thing. And then, but when I pop out, effectively, the assignment data structure is basically going to show that they either clicked, well, obviously, if they hit deny, I'm not going to prompt them to authenticate, but if they hit approve, that's what it's going to record. And then popping out of the re-authentication, I'll basically just do a set entity state to basically say that they actually passed the re-authentication step kind of thing.
I'm thinking here in the moment, it might make sense to just offer them to authenticate through like a sub dialogue instead of an approve. If that, that saves you from having an extra form in your flow. You could imagine a sub dialogue that just shows an authentication window, and then it could set some, like a flag, a text box or a checkbox that they can't edit to be, authentication confirmed, and then they could just click approve.
Right.
And if that's not, you could have a validation that looks for that value. That way you could have a form overlaid on top that says, username and password, please enter in your new information to be re-authenticated before completing this task. That might be a little cleaner, using a sub dialogue design instead of outcome path and multiple form design like we see on the canvas right here. If that makes sense.
Okay, so this is interesting. So can I get the sub dialogue up before the actual assignment completes?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you could make sure you could get it to work so that, so let's just assume I'll put a text box here, and this will be called, actually, let me do a checkbox. Is authenticated or something. then we'll just name it, or this will be like has been authenticated. And this will be, all right. And so what we could say, this is going to take a little bit of work, but let's add a sub dialog. Is it actions or data? Actions, sub dialog. Here's a sub dialog button. And this will be called, and I'm going to create a flow here called authenticate. There you go, authentication form. Look at that. Helpful. And then here I could have a form, which is my authentication form. And I'll just create a new form. I'm not going to put anything on this. And then I'll go back to change data here. So
actually, just to interject quickly
please.
here, this has been something that I've not really understood in the sub dialog.
Mm-hmm.
What is the purpose of having that change data outcome?
If you want to send data back to the form, so you can have the sub dialog, like you could have, I think we see this a lot, and Carrie can disagree with me, but let's say I have a data repeater and it maybe has a lot of data, and I could have a sub dialog button that I click and it shows me a form with lots of fields for that one row. And so I could send the selected data repeater row into the sub dialog, and I could pass back out an updated object. And that way I can have like much more sophisticated UI that retains the sort of host form behind it instead of moving between forms.
Okay.
No, Will, I will not disagree with you. I agree with you 100%. That's almost exactly what we're doing with our use case. So Alex, on our version of the forms, we are using that we pass in a list of file data. So we have like the file names, maybe like 5 or 6 PDFs, for example. And then so with the sub dialog, we have the option to add additional ones or remove ones. And so when we do that, we're passing the updated list of the files back out to the form.
Okay.
I'd be happy to take another look and walk through that with you if you need.
Okay, great. No, it's just back to the point of, the idea that you can leave that endpoint hanging if you're actually not using the functionality.
Let me just get this set up, and let's see. For those of you that don't know, sub dialogs are like pop-up forms that we can run. So let's see what they look like. If I debug this, should get my assignment. Here's my form, and if I click sub dialog button, over top of my form will be my new form here. And so Alex has a requirement that before a user can authenticate, before they can approve or do work on the assignment, they have to re-authenticate. So this could be a flow that's running our callback to AD to do our authentication. And then what I'm saying is it could pass back and it could update a value on the form. And then there could be a visibility rule on approve that's looking at that value, so that you can only click approve if the sub dialog flow has been run to set that value. A little bit of a kind of a few pieces there.
From where I'm trying to get to, like the sub dialog button for me is actually the approve button.
Mm-hmm.
So when you click the approve button, up comes the sub dialog.
Okay.
And then if they authenticate successfully, then the flow would, it would have the effect of, of hitting this other approve button and,
automatically. Okay.
Automatically kind of thing.
Then you can use outcome rules. You should be able to use outcome rules to force that, I think.
That's what I was going to suggest.
Yeah, if we scroll down here, we should see outcome rules.
Right.
And an outcome rule could allow me to, if this value changes, I can force the flow to complete. Like, so if we just say outcome rules and outcome path will be approve, right? So here I guess we'll have to add a new rule, which is test, checkbox value or something. And then we would set up a rule. I'm not going to set the whole thing up here, but an outcome rules will let you, if a certain condition is true, and we can use the rule engine to confirm that condition, then you set the outcome path. And as soon as that condition is true, like as soon as someone has entered a valid social security number, we could have a rule that says go down the approved path automatically. So you can chain sub-dialog buttons with outcome rules together. Now, to have a sub-dialog flow on like when it hits its end step, update a value on the form and then trigger an outcome path or an outcome rule,
Gotcha.
and then go down the outcome path.
Okay, perfect. Yep. That's great. Thank you.
So let's see. Let's look at our documentation. Do we have, if we look for form outcome rules here. Form outcome rules allow the designer to create a custom rule that can be used to control the outcome behavior of a form and a flow. Well, that is technically true, but not that helpful. But this example for form outcome rules tells you how to use these things. So there are a few moving pieces there. Again, it's a sub-dialog flow to show your form using the change data outcome on it to pass data back to the parent form, and then building some outcome rule to check for a value change on that. So right now, in fact, I could get this to work. It's probably too complicated to get everything together. Where did I didn't save my rule. Never mind. I was gonna say, but you should be able to play around with the outcome rule piece itself pretty easily and see if that meets your needs. Is that helpful to give you some?
Yeah, that's great. That seems to be all the parts that I need to put together to get this happening, except for actually talking to my Active Directory, which is
Sure.
another thing.
Sure, yeah. Okay. All right, I'll move on to the other Alex then, if that's if we answered your question.
Thank you very much.
You bet. All right, so Alex is asking, I have a data model made of 2 elements, transaction header, a folder extension, and transaction item, a database structure. Transaction header has one or many transaction items. I have 2 questions, one on data model and the other is on folder extension itself. Data model, what is the better way to model this data? Is it the standard way of modeling a one-to-many relationship in which I add a transaction header ID to the transaction item table, or is it to define the transaction item as a list field in the transaction header ID? Yeah, okay, so let's create our 2 types here, just so we can have these to talk about. Is your question for the first piece, Alex, is it more, should I let the data type designer do the mapping or control the mapping in my flows?
No, I was thinking, from a perspective of what is more efficient from a decisions point of view. This is just for a quick POC, and I know the items table is not required by any other piece of the application. In that case, yeah, if it were required elsewhere, no doubt better to model it in the standard way. However, I was wondering if I can also do it as a list as one field in the defined as a list in the header, whether I'm gaining some functionality or making the demo easier in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, so I'm going to create a transaction item, which is a database structure, and a folder extension, which is transaction header here. So this is a fine relationship to make. Data structure, simple data structures, I think as you mentioned, are the most lightweight database persistent data type that the product offers. They don't save themselves, they're not viewable in the portal. They don't register themselves into the entity header table. They can handle lots of data. And what I would do, and just create this relationship, is if I have a transaction header and I need to have a list of transaction items in my header, I would edit my type and I would put, I would create a property called transaction items. And then I would find my transaction item database structure and set it to is list. And then let decisions, data type designer or data model layer, I guess if I can call it that, handle that for me. So now if I create a flow and I look at that, what I'll do is come into a flow and go to user defined types, folder extensions, find my transaction header. And on that, if I find a create step, and I do build data on my extension data, I'll have transaction items, and I can do build array, and I can build up a list of those transaction items on the transaction header.
Yeah. Presumably, if I entered the data using a data repeater in a form prior to that step that you have drawn there, it could map the list of that data repeater to this field, the transaction items.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, you could just pass that array right into your transaction items on the create step or an edit step, and then update that list.
And in that way, I would not need, correct me if I'm wrong, a for each loop to map that.
Yeah, you don't require one. That's absolutely true, unless you needed the flow to do some transformation for you.
Because I've done it, the other way, and I needed the for each loop, right? Because I have to map each of the records in
right. Yeah,
the data
right.
To a record in the other table of the database.
Right. Yeah, that's correct. You wouldn't. Yeah, in this example, you don't need to do that.
Okay.
Now, this is nice, and given your volumes and volume, I don't know how deep dive of a question we go into the volume. This is easy to use, but when you start, it does become a little bit of a hassle, I might say, if we want to start writing reports. So here's our folder extension. Let me edit it so I can add one, because probably where you're going, let me just show add, edit, delete. I just need to get into a place where I can add one. I'm going to add a folder here. So add entity user defined transaction header, call this FE1. And I'm going to add a transaction item here. So here's FE1. This is an actual piece of transactional data your workflow is generated. If I click into that, I probably am going to want to create custom views, right? So of the list of transaction items in the transaction, things like that.
Sorry for interrupting. This was the other question. I see that you get exactly the same result. When you click on FE1, I get to this page that is empty. That was my second question. So you're answering it.
Oh, great. Yeah, so you're going to want a page here. Now, this gets a little wonky. So if we look, we can add custom pages in our transaction header folder extension configuration folder. I like the list view here, and you can create page. And so we can click create page or dashboard, name this thing details, and we can go ahead and create this page. Now I'll just put a report viewer. I'll just put 2 report viewers with no content and save this. Now, if I come back to FE1, I don't think it'll show. It won't, because it won't show till after a restart. But let me go ahead and add another one, and this will be called FE2. And I'll put transaction items on this thing. I'll just name this one ASDF and click OK. If I come into FE2, I should see my page now. So here's my detail page. So I can use the decisions report designer and page designer to build up these tabs with custom views for this transaction, right? Now this is where it gets a little tricky, where an entity-based design is much easier. And to do this, I'm going to build up. I'm going to create a data type of a entity. This will be, I'm going to call this T item. It's going to be it's like transaction item as well, right? I'll just give it the same property, click save. Here, I'm not actually going to make a relationship between T item and transaction header. I'm going to let my flow do that for me. And I'm going to really quickly just make a flow that'll add an item into my folder here. This isn't part of the example. I'm just going to create a quick action here. And every time I run this action, I'm going to add a T item. So here's user defined types, entities, T item, and I'll go ahead and create. And on this, I'm going to do folder ID comes from the folder I'm in right now, because this is in a configuration folder. So the context is me always right clicking on an object, right? I already have that object. An item to create, I will just put some data in here. This will be called entity data, and I'll set my string and my name to be the same thing. Again, bear with me just really quick while I get set up here. I just want to show you some of the differences. in reporting. So if I come back and I right click FE2, I have user action flow 1. Now, if I run that, one of the things, the first thing you should notice is if I come to folder view, this is no longer empty, right? Because entity data, which is my T item, right? My T item type is in the folder. So an entity, unlike a simple data structure, has a folder context. It lives in the portal in a particular place, right? And this can make writing reports very easy, but may not be the type of thing you want to use for high volume, like very high volumes, because entities are portal searchable. You know, I can search for, I should be able to search for entity data here. Yeah, I can find, you know, entity data. It's a T item I have manage. I can look at it. I can find it. Unlike my simple data structure data, which I have to write reports for. In my flow, or what I can do is I'm going to create 2 reports. One for my entity. This will be, I'll call it T item report. And data sources, I'll find T item again. It doesn't like that. So user defined types, entities, a T space item, look at that. And in here, I'll put, you know, str1 and entity name. Now, the beautiful thing is these filters, I can click add in folders, and I can say, show me for current folder and subfolder. Now this, and go ahead and save and close. So now if I come back into my configuration folder and I come to my page and I edit I can select that report here. So I'm gonna go ahead and pick my default report as my T item report. And if I save this and close and come back to FE1 or FE2, excuse me, it should show me my thing. Now, if I do that same thing with the simple data structure, I can't get it. I have to use a flow source report or some other way to pass in the ID, my folder ID context that I'm in right now, into that report so it can find the transaction item and show it in my report view. So, and then that's just, so now you're talking about using a flow source report, probably a get page, a data step, or like a full, like a query, some other sort of more complex way to generate the data. And so one of the nice things about these folder entity relationships is how easily they you can get to these type of reports. So now you can imagine there's tiles and all sorts of other pieces that this entity and folder based report is making very seamless for me. Once you know how to use to report on the simple data structure data, it's fine. It just takes a little bit more work to set up. But again, this one, this one on the right is the simple data structure data, right? This is handles large data better, but is more work to build. This is not going to be something you want to push millions of transactions through, but is more fit for like smaller processes.
And in this case, T item, is it a list in the transactional header, or is it a child, a standard child table in the database? Can you tell me the data configuration of T item for a sec?
You want me to edit T item?
Yeah, just to see how you did.
Yeah. So you'll notice here T item only has a single property, but because it's an entity, it gets a parent folder ID.
Oh, you defined it as an entity, not as a
correct
data. Okay.
Yeah, so T item here is specifically a folder entity data structure, contrasting that with a simple data structure. And this gets a location in the portal. And we define that location in the portal by a property called entity folder ID. And what Decisions knows is this is an entity, and its entity folder ID or parent folder ID is FE2. So it knows when it loads a report with a current folder filter of an entity data source, it can build that query up for us automatically and give us that for free.
So then the header, the transaction header, has a definition, one field that is a list. And sorry, where is the?
Yeah, it
the
doesn't
T-
exist. The T item doesn't exist in this. It's not defined as a part of the extension data. It's because entities can be put in folders. It's the same thing if I added a comment. Do I have, let me edit my folder extension piece here. And I want to show add comment, add document. And I think I refresh here.
These become things that you put in the transaction header folder. Sorry, in the folder FE1, FE2, right?
Yeah, correct. I don't know why those aren't showing. I might have to restart to get that. Let's just add
That's
that.
okay. I think I understand. I think I
Okay.
understand. So then, sorry, then I have to go back. How do you link the transaction entity to folder?
What I did is I used a workflow engine to do the mapping for me. So I built this user action flow that I ran on the folder I wanted to add a T item to. And on the create step, you'll notice, unlike your simple data structure data step, this gives you a property called folder ID.
Yes.
And so I said,
pass the
folder ID of the folder you're on into the folder ID for the create step, thus creating that relationship between these two types for me.
Got it. Got it. Okay. I think I got it.
Okay, does that help?
Yes, a lot, a lot.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, so data types are always tough. Like, and they're we don't, we've never, you can use different data types for the same process sort of at will, and many people do design them differently. So it's happy to take these types of questions on, as it's kind of a bit of a dark art.
There's always one more way to design this. By the way, the names that decisions chose to call an entity, some of these names are not the most intuitive, right?
Sure.
Because all of these are technically entities. And, calling one of them specifically entity is not a good name.
Yeah.
And also in some places, the front end names them differently. So for example, what we call a database structure, I think when you create one of those in this folder, it would appear as a simple data structure or something like that. Yeah, there it is. Just simple data structure.
Yeah.
That's a data structure, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, but here it's called database structure. Yep.
Yeah, I know. So it would be nice if they had the same name.
Yeah, understood. I agree with you completely.
Particularly for those of us that get confused easily. Anyway, thank you very, very much. This was really appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Anybody else have any questions? Uh, 038854. Import from repository enhancement. It would be helpful to delete designer entities in the environment that have been deleted from the project prior to actually deleting anything in the environment. You're just asking for not to check in deletes as a part of the actual process, but do deletes first and then import as multi-step process, Chris?
Well, it's it occurs to me that one of our sore points with doing a checkout, when we're doing a checkout in QA or production or any other destinations, was that we'll bump into this scenario where I started with a flow, the flow uses a rule, right? Requirements change, so my next deployment, what I'm going to do is, so during my development of the next update, I change that flow. I no longer use that rule, so I delete the rule. Check that in, and the repository records both. Okay, I got a new flow here, I got a flow update here, and we don't want this rule anymore. Noted. When we go to check out to the next environment like QA, what will happen is, and I don't disagree with what it's doing, but the consequence of what happens is that it goes through, okay, let me try and delete this rule. And it says, oh, wait a minute. You can't delete this rule because this flow over here depends on it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so that then is falling in, and that now is sort of put off into this list that's going to be an error report that we're going to get.
Right.
Meanwhile, it does in fact bring down the change to the flow so that the flow no longer needs it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we end, and then basically at the very end of our import, it says, you know, I couldn't delete this thing because it depends on that, because this thing depends on it.
Right.
And now I don't dispute the need to do this check and even necessarily the result thereof. It's actually all quite accurate. But it's also a bit of a pain because now if I actually want to delete the rule, I have to hold that back for my next update is what I'm doing. And one day it occurred to me.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
And so one day it occurred to me, well, this is the problem I've seen before and I've solved, and I think that there is a solution that to my mind is easy to describe. I have no idea how hard it would be to do, but I put the request in there. And what I'm asking is, okay, business as usual, right? Because the business as usual actually does cover a lot of cases that are necessary and correct. But after I got to this point where we're at the end of this process, and I've got this list of things I couldn't delete because of dependencies, you know what? It's possible that some of these dependencies are now gone because of actual edit activity. So let's try and go through this delete list again, see if at least one of them deletes. Because if so, then in fact, one of these updates in fact did relieve a dependency. So I made some progress.
Mm-hmm.
And if I made some progress, it's possible that the next thing that fell out took away some other dependency. So maybe one of the other ones is ready to go. Try again. And so just keep trying again until either the list is empty and we are completely successful, or the list does not change, which means I'm not making progress and we are now stuck. This is a hard problem. And, I do deserve the error.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. I mean, we are probably not doing the correct sort of sequence of events or even ordering these deletes, because likely, I'm imagining, given what you're saying here, likely we should actually just do the deletes pull all the deletes from the import and handle those.
Well, I think it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. I mean, because you still have this integrity problem that you have to guard. And if you try to do it at one side, you'll have the problem. You have this, so sort of like in the current structure, you have this problem. If you try to rearrange, if you just try to rearrange the delete operation, I think you'll end up where now I'm vulnerable to maybe doing a delete when something outside of this project needed it, for example.
Right.
So I sort of like to say, I don't really disagree necessarily with how it's done today. It's just that it ought to maybe have a second go at the deletes before reporting I can't do it.
I see what you're saying. Rerun, see if the same error occurs, and if not, continue, almost like loop through the deletes, trying to see if it can clean them all up as it might have cleared up the dependency.
Right.
So it could be more, it could actually programmatically retry instead of forcing you as the user to retry.
Or the other side of that is, another way that, that might be natural from what I can tell is to try and understand, the dependency graph and then try to find your way through it.
Right.
And it occurs to me, yeah, I mean, that might be in some sense a really cool solution, but I also think it's a very hard solution when a pragmatic, thing is, well, okay, this is my list of failures because you have dependencies. Let me go off, let me set you to the side and do the rest of my work. Sort of business as usual. Now, okay, it's possible one of you is ready to go. So rather than me trying to understand this thing and actually predict the correct order, we'll just kind of discover it as we go. I think that would be a much more effective algorithm is what I'm proposing.
Sure. No, I see what you're saying. Let me drop some notes into that particular enhancement request. I mean, I agree that makes sense. I probably agree that I don't know that a failure to delete should actually bomb out. Should be like a hard end to an import or checkout. You should probably be able to.
Yeah, it does not appear to be a hard stop. It seems like it actually goes through with all the operations, and then at the very end it says, hey, I couldn't delete this because the other thing depends on it. Now I can't delete this because this other thing depends on it. And I kind of look at it and say, yeah, but those are things I just changed, and because of that change, I don't depend on it anymore.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, we'll have to leave that up to the dev team, but that's helpful feedback. I'll drop some notes in to that ticket as well.
Great.
Okay, we got any other questions from anyone today? Vitaly, do you want to present on one of these? I love that. Yeah, let's get Vitaly. Vitaly has been in the tool longer than me. We should get him to lead some of these lunch and learns. What do you think, man? You want to? I'm just going to talk at you till you go off mute and say something back at me. Make this extra cringy, as Sabrina likes to say. Hey, man.
Yeah, so on the previous question, I think when you try, I don't remember, either you try to delete or remove some item that is in project, it will tell you what items are dependent on that, and you can either keep them or delete before you check into the repository.
So does it actually prompt you to delete them as well?
That will give you, so when you remove something from repository, it will give you a list of things that should go away as well before you check in, I think.
Yeah, I'll have to follow up and check that out. I know we've been having I know we sort of went too far, making it harder. We made it way too hard to delete things because now it can actually be kind of a pain given some cross-dependency relationships to remove some things with a delete if it's used anywhere, instead of prompting you to delete, saying, hey, you shouldn't because it's used here, and providing no override. We've definitely had some people complain about that once we added that kind of validation.
Also, another idea is to remove from repository. That will not cause the issue. And the edge case that you will not advise is to update the out-of-box flows that does that stuff.
Sure. But if you remove from project, I don't think you don't check a delete in ever, right? I don't think you can remove the flow, get the flow to be deleted on on production, right? You just remove it. It's just like it never existed. I think, right? Like if you check it in, does it check it as a delete if it's been removed from the project?
If you go to repository and find that resource, you can delete from repository, and it will not be able. It will not be a part of checkout process. Also, a cool thing that I just found a couple of weeks ago, we can demo and velocity step, and why is it not working in the async mode?
You're having issues with invelocity in an async flow?
Yeah, it will not work as expected. Never.
Oh.
Because
really?
because the nature of the velocity engine. Because it creates, I think it creates the template file on the system, and if it's being used in async, it doesn't have enough time to fetch that template, and there is a fallback, but it's still not enough to fetch.
I'm pretty sure on like all the email flows for Tirade, they build up the header and footer for the support emails in an invelocity step, and I think we call all those asynchronously. I don't know a certainty. I'm not. That's interesting. I'm not familiar with that particular issue. Have you shot that into support yet?
Yeah, I just mentioned that we definitely know the workaround and the better way, which is string builder. And another cool thing that string builder is way faster. If you like do lots of updates to the same string object, string builder is faster, because if you think about the what's going on the background when you copy data or you change string object, it actually creates another object in memory. If you do like lots of updates, it's gonna be slow. In string builder requires you more steps, but it will update the same object in memory. So the reference to the like a spot in the memory is the same.
Yeah, I was aware that that was faster. I've never actually used it myself in any sort of meaningful way. How much faster is it?
More than 10 times. If you, we have tested it with like, I know people don't do that stuff, but we have tested with like a 5,000 updates and like 100,000 updates. In 100,000 updates to the same string, it's like more than 10 times faster.
Really? Is this, are you guys building up like invoice like,
No, we just a performance test.
Oh, you're just performance testing?
Some things for best practices.
Do you mind if could we sync up about that and see what you guys are doing?
Yep, sure.
I think it might be helpful for us to steal some of that work and put it into some of our like performance testing stuff we're running on the build server now. And make sure that we're catching any regressions. Aaron? Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
of course. No, give it to me right now. Here, come on. Send it to me. Cool. No, that's neat stuff. That's something for us to have more information about clearly, and not you as our customer, which is if and how much faster string builder is for large sets of string manipulation. So, a large scale string manipulation processes, right? And you're saying it's 10x faster. So what's the alternative pattern, like an in-velocity step that you're just building up in a loop?
Like I said, string builder is one, and I don't know. I remember that n-velocity was built because merge text was not reliable in some cases.
Yeah.
But then string builder was built because n-velocity purpose is not what most of the people think.
Oh, that sounds about right. That sounds like how everything would have. Yeah, I think given what it sounds like, for Vitali's point, any significant string interaction, like anything that's like any building up a dynamic like form, because you can use HTML, you can build up forms out of HTML dynamically, for example, or you can build up an HTML string, which is then gets converted into a PDF. We see this kind of frequently for customers that have a need to design complex email bodies or complex documents on the fly, and they will save off. They'll put like a in-velocity step, which is one of our merge steps in a flow, and they'll loop a bunch to add like tables or other content into the body of the email or the of the document. And likely if there's a significant amount of iterations in that flow, given what Vitali's reporting here, using a string builder based approach versus what I would normally use, like an in-velocity looping type pattern, is more performant, significantly more performant, Vitali, from what you're reporting here, not just slightly more performant.
Yeah, because like I may be wrong, but I think it creates a template file, like actual. So you would think about some process that will fetch a template and then parse that template and use that template. So it's more work than just update one object in memory.
Yeah, interesting. No, that's helpful. I should know how to use string builder better. Do we even have good string builder docs?
Yeah, the main idea, you basically do whatever you want to do inside of it, but you need to create it, and then at the end you need to purge it, and you need to transform this object to text.
Right. Yeah, we should have some performance delta docs between normal and string builder patterns. Alex, yeah, absolutely. To your question about CSS, we can follow up with some of our, we can send you over some of our internal CSS styling that like our POC team uses if you'd like to have. I don't know the easiest way to get you access, but or to find what you would want. But maybe, so Adam, if you could own this, please, for Alex, like if we could ping the POC team and just get some selections of our best internal CSS files. We'd be happy to shoot those over to you for your consumption. Like it's not a supported feature, but something we'd happy to send over to you.
Much appreciated. I just put my email in the Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to send those over. Adam, we just need to reach out to probably Elise and ask for some of their I guess the best or the top couple best CSS files that they have, and we can just shoot them over to Alex. Oh, Alex Potter also wants them as well, if you don't mind.
Anything is probably going to be better than the default that comes. Right. Thank you. Much appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we got a couple minutes left here. Anybody else got any last minute questions? Okay, well, awesome. Thanks for the good conversation today, everyone. And we will see you same time tomorrow. All right, have a great afternoon. Thank you.